absolute advantage versus relative advantage, and what this has to do with the natural rights as well as natural power of men. When we look at advantages in economics, we have two types of advantage. One is absolute advantage. So for example, if somebody can type faster than someone else, they have an absolute advantage. Or if somebody is physically stronger than someone else, they have an absolute advantage in terms of physical strength. If somebody's better at math than somebody else, they have an absolute advantage in terms of math. Now there's something else called relative advantage. Relative advantage means that you might not actually be better at the thing than someone else, but you're better at that thing than you are at something else. For example, a lawyer who can type at 300 words a minute might hire a secretary that can only type at 30 words per minute, essentially because if she puts all of her effort into typing, that's going to be more effective than for her to put some of her effort into typing and some of it into lawyering. The effort put into lawyering would be a total waste. And in the same way, the United States generally has an absolute advantage in pretty much everything, but still buys things from other countries because it always is to your advantage to specialize where you have a relative advantage. And a relative advantage, again, just means you're better at that thing than you are at some other thing. Now, how does this relate to the battle of the sexes between men and women? When it comes to producing offspring, women have an absolute advantage because men can't do it at all. When it comes to economics, that means work or anything like that, neither men nor women actually have a clear absolute advantage. In a modern economy, neither a man nor a woman has an obvious advantage in anything. Even when people talk about physical labor, with power tools and whatnot, physical strength is not as important as it used to be. A very, very, very small woman with a power tool is going to be more effective than a very, very big, strong man with a screwdriver. I mean, it's just the modern economy doesn't really depend on physical strength. So when it comes to economic value, there's no obvious absolute advantage. But let's look at relative advantage. Men simply cannot produce offspring, so they have a relative advantage. Their relative advantage is to put all their effort into economic pursuits. Jobs, businesses, whatever. Now, here's why that's important. Anything that devalues economic pursuits, therefore devalues the only thing that men can do. Men, remember, can't produce young, so the only thing that men can do is produce economic value. And what does it mean to devalue that? It means to make it so that you don't have control over it. It means you don't have the right to say no. Now, I'm just going to use a sort of a very off-putting example just to illustrate this. You might argue that right now we say that a woman has an advantage in that she can choose whether or not to have offspring with a given man. Now, let's say she couldn't do that. Let's say any man who wanted to could have offspring with any woman he wanted to. That would take away the power that women have in any sort of a negotiation type situation. Similarly, if any woman can say, yeah, I want that man's financial resources for any reason or no reason at all, that reduces the power of financial resources, reduces the power of men. And again, it's not that men have an advantage for producing economic value, it's that they have a disadvantage for anything else. So the only thing they can do is produce economic value. So how does that play out in modern culture? In modern culture, what does the welfare state do? The welfare state basically says that as a man, you cannot turn down any woman. You cannot say to any woman, I don't want to pay for your kids. You don't have the right as a man. You can't turn down, there's not a single woman in the whole country, if you're living in the United States, where you can say, I'm not going to pay for your kids, because you have to. And what that does, through taxes and whatnot, and what that does is it erodes your power. Remember, power is really the power to say no. People talk about doctors, for example, as having the power over life and death. I'm not sure that they do, because they can't choose to kill somebody. They are required to keep everyone alive that they can, which is a great service, but it's not exactly power. It's just usefulness and service. Similarly, right now, by eroding economic power of everybody, it erodes all the power of men. Now, it also erodes some power for women. I mean, if you're a woman, you still have to pay for everybody else's offspring, whether you want to or not. So it's not that it doesn't hurt women's power. It actually hurts both power. It hurts the economic power of men and hurts the economic power of women. The difference is it leaves men with absolutely nothing and leaves women with something. Now, what can we do about this? What is the thing that to be done? Because remember, disempowering men is not going to be good for anybody. Disempowering women isn't good for anybody. When you disempower people, you just cause them to act out and to lash out. And we've been seeing some really unfortunate examples recently of young men not feeling disempowered, because that's wrong, like recognizing the fact of their disempowerment. This is not an emotional thing they're doing. They are recognizing that they are, in fact, disempowered, acting out violently. So disempowering men, or women for that matter, isn't good for society. It's not good for anybody. The way to bring that power back is to return the fundamental power, which is the power to say no. Now we recognize this. There's been so much progress in society towards recognizing that all people have the power to say no when it comes to their own bodies. They have the right to say no sexually, even to their own spouse. And that's actually a relatively recent change. Even in the 1980s and 90s, spouses could not, there was no such thing as marital rape. If your spouse forced herself on you, that was just their spousal rights. And we've made a lot of progress. We've said that no, consent has to be real and has to be active. The same thing should happen when it comes to finances. Consent should be real and it should be active. And that means that you, as a man or as a woman, have the right to choose to provide or not provide for any child that you choose to provide or not provide for. That is your natural right. The fruits of your labor, your economic value, that is yours. That's not somebody else's. And to have that kind of upliftingness, to have that empoweringness that comes from from economic value, the thing that must be eradicated is the welfare state. You cannot have economic value and the welfare state coexisting. If you can't say no financially, you have no economic power. You have economic value, but you don't have economic power. Power is the power to say no. Now, if you've already read Pull Out, Men, Modern Life, and Mutiny, thank you very much. And I really want you to share those ideas as much as you can with the people who look up to you. Remember, no one person, no one book, no one small group of people is going to eradicate the welfare state all by itself. No one can do that. I can't do it. You by yourself can't do it. But working together, we actually can do that. And that's why we need to talk to the young men who look up to us about the problems with the welfare state, about the importance of economic consent, and see if we can work towards changing culture first. Remember, culture creates politics, not the other way around. And if we can work to create that awareness and that culture in the men and women who look up to you, we're going to start to be able to change politics. To learn more, you can follow the link on this post to my book, Pull Out, Men, Modern Life, and Mutiny, and you can even read the first couple of chapters free.